Hello there friends, Mr. E here, and today we are continuing our Skitarii preview series with a very important, very integral part of the class, of course, the abilities, perhaps the most defining characteristic of the Skitarii. Not only are these abilities diverse, not only are they powerful, but they also have a unique and pretty complex combat regeneration mechanic called Capacitance. So in this video today, we're going to be going over that Capacitance mechanic, helping you to understand exactly how it functions and how you can regenerate your abilities faster and faster and faster, and then what each of these abilities do, how Voltaic emitter works, what it does, how Chordclaw strike works, and how advanced combat doctrines, aka auto aim, works, plus all of their little add-ons and stuff that they can do out there. It kind of conjecturing on what these look like. I've got some game footage I'll roll as well, so we can get some basic understanding of what they look like and how they're going to function. And with all that said, yeah, at the end, hopefully the goal is you'll have a better idea of how this class functions, what these abilities can and can't do, and you'll get an idea of what you want to start building towards on the day when the Skitarii comes out, which is already Skitarii tomorrow, literally less than 48 hours away, even depending on when you watch this video. And as we head into these Skitarii filled days, if you want more Darktide content from me, you can always subscribe. If you want even more than that, you can become a YouTube channel member, which will get you bonus videos. It'll get you access to the members Discord, which has the mod setup that I run on there. And we also even have a Minecraft server now, I think. So that's fun, and it's a great community. A big thank you to everybody who is a YouTube channel member, especially my best friends, Elise, Sai, and Neva. You guys are the best. So the first thing we must understand in order to get a grip on what this character is actually doing and understand how to manipulate it and make it the most powerful possible is by understanding what the heck capacitance is and how it relates to charges. So capacitance is the mechanic that more or less takes the place of cooldown for this class. When you are generating capacitance, if you generate 100% capacitance, you'll make a charge, and those charges are used by abilities to be able to trigger the abilities, right? So the problem is that each of these abilities has a different way of consuming charges. Our Chordclaw strike will consume them one at a time, so you'll get multiple strikes for each charge that you have. Then you'll get Voltaic emitter, which consumes all of your currently available charges for varying effects based on how many you ate. And then finally, advanced combat doctrines, which slowly drains your capacitance, and every time you run out of capacitance, you'll take another charge. So more or less, it's acting like draining your batteries. So I think in order to explain this, we gotta go to the classic Mr. E Photoshop void, where we have a lovely diagram here of what's going on. So more or less, this is what's happening in terms of how you're gonna build and drain capacitance. Capacitance, if we start the ability, we're going to have 3 charges. You see down there on the bottom, these are our charges, right? So our charges are comprised of 3 100% capacitance, full meters. Say, for instance, I'm using Chordclaw strike. Then, as I said before, when we use the ability, we'll drain one of these charges every time we use the ability. And then as soon as you use it, you're going to start working on regenerating that next one until you hit 100%, and then you'll have another use. It doesn't give you another use of the ability until you hit that 100% mark, right? Ignore these second marks here for right now. So that's how you're going to work with that ability. However, if you're using Voltaic emitter, when you press the button, boom, it's going to drain all your charges immediately, and then you're going to start from ground zero. You're going to start from 0 and work your way back up to getting multiple charges. So that's how that ability works. And then the last ability, perhaps the most complex of them, is going to be that auto aim ability, which is going to drain consistently over time. So while you're, I'm actually doing this on the wrong layer. While you're actually working with this ability, while you've got it activated, you've got a certain number of charges. Like you say you start with 3, and you can have more than this, by the way, based on one of the keystones. But say you start with 3, you'll drain 25% instantly when you activate it, and then it'll drain 10% per second. And then once you drain all of one charge, it'll move on and it'll start with the next one. And this is how your charges are used over time with that class or with that ability. So that is how your charges are used here, and then you'll just build up from wherever you stop. So you can actually stop that ability at any time. Say you were halfway through this one and you stopped right there, well, you would start resuming from that point and build back up. So that ability is a little bit independent of charges. You do have to have one in your bank to activate it to start though. So that's the way that the charges relate to capacitance. You have to reach 100%, it'll give you a charge. Easy, right? Now the next big important thing here is what happens if you add in combat ability regeneration curios, and that's what this 88% represents. If you take 3 combat ability regeneration curios, you can get a reduction of 12% total in the amount of capacitance that it takes to get another charge. So instead of having to go to 100%, you'll only have to go to 88% in order to get another charge added, which is really good, right? That's already a 12% reduction in how long it takes to get your combat abilities for every other class in the game. Works the same way here, but it's compounding because this class has multiple charges. So going to 88% 3 times is way more efficient than going to 100% 3 times, right? You're cutting 36 capacitance percent off of the total that you need to get 3 charges here. So if you're going for abilities that you want to build up even more and more charges, this is an incredibly valuable stat to have on your curios. And then we have an even greater way of getting that charged up, which is the 78% line. This is including if we have a Psyker on our team who's running the 10% ability cooldown aura, because that will stack and it'll give us 78%, and that'll cut another 30% off. We'll end up being at 234% total to get 3 charges versus the 300% base. So that's some really great ways to get more charges faster. Another way that we can finally leave our void here, another great way to get more ability charges faster is by doing stuff, doing stuff to generate capacitance. So now we got to get on to how capacitance is generated. I want to give a shout out to Cooley's guide for having all the exact details on how this stuff works. It was pretty hard to piece together from watching gameplay and having people test it, but yeah, of course, as per usual, he's got your back. So you can go over to, I'll link it in the description. He's got a great guide on all things Skitarii. You can go on there, and if you got some time, if you want to read, you need some toilet reading, perfect, absolutely ideal for that sort of thing. You'll learn so much, probably more than you ever wanted to know. But basically, this class has a number of ways of generating capacitance. One of them is literally just standing around. When you're doing nothing, you're generating 2% per second. So if you think about it from that perspective, you're going to take 50 seconds to generate 1 charge if you're just standing there. If you have any cooldown reduction curios, though, that's going to cut some time off of that. So it'll cut 6 seconds off if you're just standing around. That's pretty good, right? Now, this can be augmented by killing enemies at a baseline without any talents equipped at all. So killing any enemy is 2% of your capacitance back, and that's any low tier enemy. So like the littlest like poxwalkers and stuff like that, all 2%. So killing 10 of them in one fell swoop will actually give you 20% immediately. There's no cap on how often this can occur or how many enemies you can kill at one time or anything like that. And then this effect is doubled if the target is an elite or a specialist. So you will get 4% for every elite or specialist you kill, which means you can generate really high amounts of capacitance if you're playing on higher difficulties with more density of enemies and more of these specialists and elites crammed into the levels. So we're going to generate a ton from that alone. Now, this isn't all, though, right? We have even greater ways of regenerating it here, thanks to these 4 augment nodes close to the center of the map. And these are really powerful. So Augmented Power Cycler here can generate 1 per second, 1% per second, which means instead of having 2% per second when you're just chilling, this is 3% per second now. That's a pretty big upgrade. We can also get Flux Conduit buildup here, which generates 5% over 4 seconds. It doesn't stack, but it does refresh within itself. So if you're just critting at least once every 4 seconds, you're constantly adding another 1.25% to your generation. It's really good. And then we have down here Reactor Core Recharge. Weak spot kills generate 2% capacitance. This stacks with the other benefits you get from kills, right? So if you kill a regular enemy, you get 2%, but if you kill him with a headshot, you'll get 2% from this, and you'll get 2% from the kill itself. So that's a big upgrade if you can get some headshot kills. And for elites, it's 4 and 2, so 6%. And then over here we have Capacitor Reclamation Loop. Hitting 3 or more enemies with an attack restores 1% capacitance. So for every attack, if you can cleave at least 3 enemies, it can restore it 1 time per attack, 1%. So that can be pretty good, right? If you've got multiple enemies in front of you and you can cleave multiple times, you can pump a lot of capacitance out of this. Probably not as much as directly killing them, but hey, you can still get it multiple times if you're cleaving through those enemies. So there's your basic ways to generate capacitance. But that's not all, there's even more, and they're out here in the keystones. So the keystones each have a way of augmenting and giving you even more capacitance generation. These top 2 here, the redline capacitors and power overload, have very similar ones. Redline capacitors, its basic effect is it multiplies your capacitance generation. If you take this plus the resource optimization canticles, you can build up to getting 25% resource generation, capacitance generation, which is really, really good. It takes every bit of capacitance generation we talked about so far. So all of the 2% you get from just standing around, the extra 1% here, the extra 2% on headshot, the 4% you get from killing elites, the 2% from killing individual enemies, all that's going to get multiplied by an additional 1.25 times. So you're going to get a big boost there, and that's going to be quite nice because all of that is building towards your goal here, right? So if you already had reduced your goal from 100 to 88, and now you're multiplying the speed at which your charges grow, you can make this like power up really quickly. And then over here we have a similar thing with power overload. Now as a baseline it doesn't, but if you do take this keystone modifier here, static capacitor drain, and you can overload 24 times, which doesn't take that long when you're playing on a high difficulty and you have lots of enemies to kill, you'll get that same multiplier of 25% increased capacitance generation. So you'll end up at the tide with real-line capacitors. And then finally down here, we have Flensing Protocols, which has this augment higher purpose. Elites and Specialist Kill restore an additional 5% capacitance. So Elites and Specialists normally are restoring 4%. This jumps them to 9% on a kill for them, which is really big. And keep in mind, right, if you killed them with a headshot, you're going to generate 11%. And if you killed them with a crit headshot, you're going to generate 5% more over the next 4 seconds after that. So this can be really massive in terms of generating lots of capacitance very quickly. And the final thing I think that generates capacitance on the tree is Satiated Steel. With the Chordclaw kill here, when you kill with it, it's going to generate 25% of your capacitance over the next 5 seconds, which is pretty dang good, especially when you consider if we reduce our limit, if we instead of having 100% as our limit, if we have a Psyker on our team and we have our cooldown reduction curios, it'll only take 3 of those 25% and we'll basically be at getting another charge back. And this can also, of course, be multiplied by those additional 25% nodes that we talked about. So that'll multiply all that up and be nice and juicy. So wow, yeah, lots of ways to generating capacitance, and that is how we get our ability charges up. It can be stupid fast. As you can see, the faster you can kill and the more of these prerequisite things you can do while you're doing those kills, the better you're gonna generate your ability charges. So with that being said, now we can talk about what these abilities actually freaking do. Yay! And let's start with the Voltaic emitters. So let's showcase a little bit of gameplay of this. And here we go. It's Jeff, I guess, this time, I believe. So let's see what he can do.
The gunner's flanked. Okay.
All right, so hopefully you saw that big pulse there, right? And you can see these enemies here. These are gunners. I don't know, one of them keeps shooting. But when that pulse goes out,
The gunner's flanked.
right there, you can see that these enemies who got hit by it, only that guy in the back is still shooting. Everybody else is standing around. Their guns are jammed. So this is a Voltaic discharge. I think he does it again a little bit later on up here. And this is his quality, not mine. I don't know why he streams in 1080p. Take it up with him. He's going to use it right here somewhere. There it is again. Okay. Going out. Okay, and that's it. And you notice when he uses it, it's down here, and when he uses it, it consumes all of his charges, as we mentioned previously. So let's read what Voltaic emitter is actually doing functionally and talk about how powerful it is. Unleash an electric discharge around you. Enemies within 12 meters are electrocuted for 2 seconds, stunning them and dealing damage. So it's at least a brief interrupt. That stun is going to interrupt their attacks. I think we can actually see that with the maulers right here. Let's watch them try to do an attack. Yeah, see, this guy he was winding up to do an attack, and then he got stunned by that, and he instead just gets jolted, and he can't do anything. It puts him into a very small state of stagger. So that's what you can do at a baseline. But if you use it when you have at least 2 charges, you will turn off the ranged enemy's guns within 30 meters. So all those enemies, they're going to have their guns jammed, and they're basically going to stand there and doing nothing. Now, for most elite gunners in this game, that means like Reapers and the elite gunners, like the Tread gunners and the Scab gunners, those guys don't have melee weapons to swap to. So they literally just stand there and do nothing. But for our other types of gunners, we have, those small gunners who have a sword as well. We have shotgunners and plasma gunners who both have melee weapons in addition to their shotguns and their plasma guns. Those guys will just be forced out of using their range mode, and they'll instead engage in melee, which will bring them into you, which is kind of nice. And that's a pretty massive range. 30 meters is huge. And so this is probably the most powerful effect that this ability has. to absolutely turn off all gunners within the 30-meter radius. I believe, however, this also does require line of sight. It doesn't say it here, but I have noticed in the demonstrations that, yeah, it seems to be getting blocked by obstacles in the way, which can be problematic, right? So you want to make certain that you can like get a line of sight on those enemies, and that could potentially be really impactful. Then the third thing you can get here is if you were at 3 charges or above, for the next 15 seconds, your attacks can electrocute enemies hit for 2 seconds, dealing damage. So yeah, electrocuting enemies is generally pretty good. It adds like extra damage, and of course there's tons of stuff in this tree to deal with adding on extra damage when you're hitting electrified enemies. So that's a nice little buff there. As far as the augments up here, Voltaic arcs, when you use this, you're going to release 1 forward-facing arc per charge spent. They deal high damage and impact. I couldn't find any clips of anyone using this, but yeah, I mean, there you go, right? So you could get up to 5 charges. I believe this does. I haven't seen anyone use it for the line capacitors yet either. I promise I'll get around to testing this as soon as I get my hands on it. But yeah, you could release 3 at a baseline and up to 5 of the red line capacitors stacked to maximum. But yeah, that's going to release these arcs. Those arcs can then hit enemies and deal a bunch of damage to them, impact, knock them down. Good. Then Voltaic Motivator, when using this at 2 charges or above, you gain 15% attack speed for 15 seconds. That's a nice size attack speed buff and a nice size of duration as well. So a pretty juicy buff. I like that there. And then Voltaic Overcharge here. Voltaic Emitter restores 25% toughness plus an additional 1% toughness for each enemy hit by the electric discharge. So given that this has a baseline 12-meter radius, that's pretty big. That is pretty big. So if you got surrounded by a horde, this is going to be your instant toughness refill. It could be pretty powerful in that right, but even just 25% flat is pretty good. So that's what Voltaic Emitter can do. I think the easiest, most powerful part of this is the interrupt, of course. Like being able to interrupt like that is really good, as we know from Ogren's taunt ability, the fact that it just like kind of stops all enemies from doing what they're doing, at least for a split second. But then that interrupt, that jam for all ranged enemies is tremendous. This is going to make bringing this ability, I think this is going to be like the Havoc Classic, right? Because there's so many times where the hallway is just full of gunners and you had to stand there plinking them down forever. If someone can get out there and get within 30 meters, which is a long distance from these enemies, and use Voltaic Emitter, boom, they're all shut down. 12 seconds for you to advance on them and engage on them with absolutely favorable odds, and 12 seconds is a long time in terms of building up more charge, as you probably understand once you saw how some of these charge generation mechanics work. So that's what we got going on with Voltaic Emitter. Let's take a look at our next one here, which is the Chordclaw strike. So I got some footage of, I believe it's old Jeffy doing this again.
Everything was already done.
So one thing I want you to notice about the Chordclaw strike is it does have a bit of a lunge here. Just let it do it. Do it. A little bit there. I think it's more visible right here. Yeah, okay. So there's a bit of a lunge and there's some momentum with it. So this Chordclaw strike, it has multiple different functions you can do, as we'll show when we talk about the ability modifiers for it, but this does throw you forward with a good bit of momentum. I believe that you might actually be able to do some movement tech off of this if you have a nice reaction time on your slide. That very similar to how you can kind of charge and then slide with the RB's short shield charge. So that could be fun. But you'll notice that he's using one charge every time he does it. And there's 2 different things he's got going on here. So right here, he's going to use a regular, he's going to use a slash. You see that? He'll do it again right here. Okay, so what he's doing right there, that is a horizontal slash. That is one of the augments right here. It's called Axial Slash. So with Axial Slash equipped, if you tap this, the button for this ability, it will swipe horizontally. It can wipe out hordes. It's a really, really high damaging attack. So for anything sub like crusher level, sub mauler, sub crusher level, it's an instant kill on these targets. So really good for horde clear. And of course, it's going to guarantee a kill. So Satiated Steel, great way to build back up your charges, obviously. This is also, by the way, counted as a heavy melee attack. So for those purposes, Hydraulic Impact down here is just more damage. It's 15% more damage on this ability, which is awesome. So, and it's also just a melee attack in general. So other things like, Sustained Assault Doctrine, these are going to be added up when you're using it. Successful melee attacks added up when you're using this because it is a melee attack coded ability. So that's what we got going on there. And then you can also when you have this ability equipped, you can also press and hold the ability to do the default attack if you have the axial slash equipped. So when this crusher shows up here in a second, he'll do that. There's another axial slash, and here, watch this crusher. He's going to hold down the ability, and he's going to do a face rip. So that's what you can do when you have the just the base ability. You can stick your claw to someone and rip their face off, more or less. And that does a ton of damage. It has 50% rending. It does a tremendous amount of damage to a single target. So that's what you can get even without the axial slash thing equipped. So that's just the base. And then we have two more over here, Slice and Dice. This and Satiated Steel are mutually exclusive. So you can either choose to restore 25% of your capacitance over 5 seconds, get way more uses, or you can go with Slice and Dice, which every time you use your Chordclaw, it'll stack its 20% more damage on it up to 3 times, but you have to use it within 5 seconds. So this is going to be really, really strong with redline capacitors here because you can generate more charges and you can hold 5 charges. So you could get to that maximum of 60% additional damage, and this would be doing a tremendous amount of damage if this is fully stacked up. However, you can't get that cooldown regeneration if you have this. Both of these abilities here, Axial Slash and Probing Strikes, these are also mutually exclusive. These are, so you can either choose Probing Strikes or you can choose Axial Slash. Let's look what Probing Strikes does here. I think he's got some footage of it right here. So here's Probing Strikes. We will do 3 stabbies, and then stabby. So this is what you do. Each one of those is an activated ability. So when you stab with that, it hits 3 times. It stacks a bunch of bleeds on the enemy. I won't even bother getting into how those bleed mechanics work. They're pretty complex, but note that this is the single target destroyer. That will absolutely eviscerate bosses, but you have to choose one or the other, because if you choose this one, then single tapping the ability will become that attack, and holding down the ability will become the face ripper. If you choose this one, then it's the slash on the single tap, it's the face ripper on the hold, just like normal. Okay, so that is how Chordclaw Strike works. As far as abilities, I think that this one is very, very dominant right now. Super easy to use, tons of uptime. It gets rid of dangerous enemies in a flash, does lots of boss damage. This is going to be a very, very competitive sort of ability. And finally, we have one that I am very, very interested in getting my hands on to play with, which is Advanced Combat Doctrines. So Advanced Combat Doctrines, you're going to swap to your secondary weapon. You're immediately going to cost yourself 25% capacitance to activate this. But then when this weapon is activated, you have a 90% spread reduction and 60% recoil reduction for its duration. In order to aim at enemies and hit enemies, all you have to do is aim within a pretty close proximity to them. So let's watch Jeff play with the old bolt action here, the Garand. Okay, so you see he's not really aiming at them, but he's aiming close enough, and then it is seeking for heads. And what it does is it can zero in on 3 different body parts, or 3 different areas of the enemy. There's a chest level, there's a head level, and there's also a center level, but only certain enemies have that center level, and you have to be pretty close to get to differentiate. But the reason why there's both a chest and a head location is because certain enemies, like maulers, of course, don't have armor on your chest, so you'd want to shoot them in the chest. For a, I think he does shoot some in a second here.
Rifle for this.
So, like for a mauler there, he wants to shoot them in the chest because they're going to take more damage in the chest versus the carapace armored head. But for other enemies, all you got to do in order to hit the head is just aim high. And you can see the little blue orbs that sort of show you where roughly you're aiming, although you probably wouldn't care. So the easiest way to do this is when you're scanning and you're about to start firing, just kind of aim a little bit high on enemies, and it'll pull down and actually hit them in the head. And you have to be like within like a couple degrees of aiming in the right place, and it's all good. But this reduces the recoil and the spread so massively that you can full auto with infantry autoguns and all that stuff, and every single bullet will hit the enemy. This auto aim mechanic, by the way, continues out to 100 meters. So it is an incredibly, incredibly long range. And it's, you know, the fact that it can make you guaranteed to hit subsequent headshots is going to be incredibly powerful for certain weapons. So yeah, I think this is a really, really potential heavy ability. And let's talk about why. So of course, it's not a ability that drains charges like instantly like the other ones it does. This one drains 10% capacitance per second. So what you really don't want to do with this ability is be spending a lot of time with it active without shooting, because you only drain 1% additional capacitance per shot, right? So if you have a weapon that shoots a very impactful single shot, and can shoot them relatively fast, yeah, if you can shoot 10 rounds per second, you're going to drain an additional 10%, but that's way better in terms of utilizing it than it is to just sit there and only shoot one time in 1 second, because that's going to drain 10% for basically free, right? So you kind of want this balance. You want to find guns that get a lot of value out of having this buff active for every bullet they fire. And I think that fortunately on this class we have a lot of weapons like that. Now, an additional mechanic here that is really fun, and I think I'm going to make some funny builds around it, is the drain is paused while reloading. Now think about this for a second. During this ability's active period, and all the time, this does not stop capacitance from being regenerated. So you'll notice in his gameplay footage here, watch his ability cooldown, maximize it so it's not in the way here. Watch his ability cooldown while he's firing here in a second. If it would get out of the way. There we go. So watch it. He's going to activate it here once he's done stabbing guys.
Instead of the plasma gun, we can probably do the galvanic rifle for this.
Okay, so it activates. Now watch what happens when he reloads.
The damage against Carapace.
You see it? It's moving up. It's moving up. It's getting close to going back to 2 charges. So you can generate, not only is this kind of like a combat, it's like you're battling with your regeneration versus your drain every second while it's active, but it can regenerate while you're reloading because there's no drain while you're reloading. So if you have a long reload weapon, you can actually generate a lot of capacitance back while it's reloading, like the plasma gun, right? And this means you can get all these effects that go on with this ability for the full time you're reloading for free, actually for less than free, because you're gaining capacitance back, you're gaining more battery power just passively. So passive generation effects like augmented power cycle and the basic 2% for just standing around, other stuff that can kill enemies like Artificer Servo Skull while you're reloading, all that's going to generate a ton of effect for you because you can get your capacitance back. Okay, now let's talk about the augments here. Starting down here with calculated priority, elite kills give you 5% damage for 10 seconds, stacking 5 times. This is tremendously powerful, right? That's 25% damage. That is good. 10 seconds is a long duration of a buff. With an ability like this where it just automatically snaps to enemies, it's going to be very, very easy to pick out enemies, especially elites, and just kill them automatically. A lot of weapons in this class are very, very good at sniping those elites. Then we have Readiness Doctrine, probably the weakest of these, 25% reload speed for the duration of Advanced Combat Doctrines and 5 seconds afterwards. Of course, this does mean you'll spend more time shooting and therefore you'll be able to put out a higher DPS. However, having a 25% slower reload speed is not a detriment to this ability, right? Because it doesn't cost you more juice to reload. It just costs you, you actually gain juice while you're reloading. So having a slower reload is going to allow you to extend this ability for longer, which I think might be kind of meta. And then we have Piercing Sight here. This one is so good. 15% range critical strike chance and 30% range cleave when you activate it. But if you get 4 seconds in, you can get 60% range cleave and 30% range critical strike chance, which is massive, massive, massive. So that is a huge steroid if you can make it to 4 seconds, which is very easy to do. And then we have Writ of Ammunition Enumeration, which is the same thing here. 15% fire rate, jumping to 30% fire rate after 4 seconds. And yeah, these just require you to fire for at least 4 seconds. Keeping in mind, right, it takes 25% instantly and then 10% per second. But that's combated by how much you're regenerating each second. So say, for instance, you have Augmented Power Cycler and your base 2%, you're now only draining 7% per second. And you're also going to be going uphill against it if you have things like Static Capacitor Drain here fully stacked up. That's multiplying your gains by 25%. If you have crit recently, if you are, just generally doing any of these things, you're going to be fighting it off pretty dang well. So you can stay in this for a very, very long time if you're killing. And then finally, I think most interestingly to me is Restoration Protocol here. Advanced Combat Doctrines restores 10% toughness per second for the duration and instantly clears all suppression on activation. 10% toughness per second for the duration. If you activate this ability and then you reload a gun, like the plasma gun, that has a 9-second reload, you can generate your entire toughness for free, right? You can just stand around for 9 seconds and generate your entire toughness for free. Then you can fire one shot and reload again. and stall it out for another 10 seconds. So you could just be constantly printing at least 10% of your toughness per second while gaining capacitance. Really, this would work with any gun. So I think ultimately what could become a meta with this ability is to stall, is to like, okay, I'm using my arc rifle, I'm shooting, and then there's no enemies around. Well, if I turn off the ability, the next time I activate it, I have to cost 25%, right? Then why don't I just press the reload key right now, and I'll gain some capacitance back while this is going on. I'll gain it at the normal rate, I can reload, and then maybe I'll find some more enemies. Oh, I didn't find an enemy. I'll shoot one more time, I'll reload again, right? So we can just be passively gaining capacitance back while we're doing this, and this is keeping our toughness going up. It's keeping these buffs fully stacked at 30% crit and 30% fire rate. I think there's something going on here. So that has got me super excited to mess around with. And that is everything for abilities, guys. Really, there's some very, very cool stuff here. I can't wait to see what we can come up with. I think there's some very, very cool optimizations and little intricacies to be had here. I believe that Advanced Combat Doctrines is going to be the absolute Auric Stomper because of the ability, just how easy this ability is to use, and it does consume ammo like pretty crazy, but there's ways to offset that in the class. But yeah, I had fun talking about this stuff. I hope you guys are excited for the class as I am. We'll see on Tuesday how it all shapes up, and I'll see you out there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Mr. E out of here. Bye-bye.